All right, so welcome you guys. I think we're on the week three class meeting. With everything going on, I'm a little bit scatterbrained. Um, but thank you for your time. Thank you for coming in. I apologize for having to cancel yesterday and move today's, and I appreciate y'all coming anyway. I mean, it just shows your dedication. So thank you again. Today we're gonna hit, like I said, I know the exam for chapter 3 was, I think, yesterday. But y'all have retakes available. There were some things that y'all had some real specific questions on. So we're going to look at chapter 3 and just make sure we have a firm understanding of some of those concepts. I'm going to share my screen. Eventually. Okay. So we are in chapter 3 of our medical coding textbook. And we are starting to really get into ICD-10. I hope that y'all have your manuals with me so y'all can follow, or with y'all so you can follow along today. And again, we're going to go over some of the more important points. And some of this we've been over before, y'all, but the refresher never hurts. Like, okay, I'm hoping that everybody has labeled these manuals by now. I've been talking about that for a few weeks now, so we definitely want to get those labeled if you have not. Guys, I'm telling you, crazy, crazy time saver. If you need more information on this, get with me. We'll talk about it, okay? All right, so we went over the steps for accurate coding last week, but you're using them even more this week. Maybe this week, now that y'all have had to dig into the ICD-10 or ICD-10, and y'all see the process a little more, now maybe it'll make a little bit more sense. So I just want to hit on it real quick. Okay, so your number one step is identifying those main terms or keywords, right? Then you're going to locate those terms in your alphabetic index, front of the manual, big gray section. Review the subterms under the main terms, which are the ones in red, in the index. Follow and cross-reference instructions such as C, like C condition, or C body part, or whatever those instructions may be. You got to follow those and see where it leads you. You want to verify the code selected from the index in the tabular. Always, always, always verify. You never stop at the index. Never, 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 never. Okay? Refer to any instructional notations in the tabular. Remember, I told you it's very important to read around your code. Follow that section maybe to the beginning to see if there's any additional stuff that you need to know about those codes. Assign codes to the highest level of specificity. And that means, for example, pain in shoulder. Well, was it the left shoulder, the right shoulder, or did they not tell you? Breath light, left, right, or unspecified. You've gotta follow your indentions and make it as specific as you possibly can. Okay. And then code the diagnosis until all elements are completely identified. And what that means is if it requires you to get it to that 7th character, you remember those X placeholders we talked about last week? Do that. If it requires one of those alpha characters at the end to indicate initial or subsequent encounters, make sure those are there, okay? So those are our steps. And y'all will see these come into play as we work through things together. All right, so we talked about the alphabetic index. Again, your main terms are in red, and then they indent down to get more specific with body parts or different things, okay? And even in the alphabetic index, guys, there is a legend down at the bottom. Down at the bottom of every single page in this manual, there is a legend that is going to key you in on some of the symbols and signs that you may see on this page and what they mean. It's all there to help you out. Verify always. Verify always. You always have to verify, because very rarely, like more than likely, the index is going to bring you to like Z115 up here, but that's not a usable code. You're going to have to follow your indentions down and see how specific you can get with it. See what other information they're going to require from that code, okay? Verify always, always, always. And this is why. Okay. Sorry. This is the guidelines, or some of the guidelines that are at the beginning of the Z code section. All right, remember I told y'all those are highlighted in green, and they're at the beginning of usually beginning of the whole chapter, like the whole body system, it's at the beginning of that. And it covers the codes throughout that chapter. Excuse me. So what these guidelines do is give you additional rules and guidelines to follow. All right, so I want to read just a little bit of this to you, just so you can kind of get an idea of some of the stuff that the information they give to you. Okay, the testing of a person, and I'm starting at the second paragraph. The testing of a person to rule out or confirm a suspected diagnosis because the patient has some sign or symptom is a diagnostic examination, not a screening. Okay, in these cases, the sign or symptom is used to explain the reason for the test. A screening code may be a first listed diagnosis if the reason for the visit is specifically the screening exam. It may also be used as an additional code if the screening is done during an office visit for other health problems, right? So what they're telling you there is the only time you can use this as a first listed diagnosis code is if the reason for the visit is specifically that screening. Otherwise, it needs to be a secondary or supplemental code, okay? Oh, goodness. A screening code is not necessary if the screening is inherent to a routine examination, such as a pap smear done during a routine pelvic examination. So like if you're coding a pap smear for our routine examination, you do not have to code all of the individual things that they do in that exam, in that general exam. You know, they usually do a set list of stuff, and that's all considered included in that code. So you don't have to use more codes than what you need to. But it's very important to take a look at the guidelines, like especially over the next couple of months, we're going to be going chapter by chapter through the body systems and coding a little bit in each one, so y'all get used to a little bit of everything. When we start a new chapter, go ahead and take a look at the guidelines. You never know what's going to stick with you, and when you're working, you're going to be like, didn't I read something about that in the guidelines? And there you go. There you go. Okay. And I've also heard from a couple of students that during their NCCT certification exam, there were a lot of questions that came out of the guidelines, that you had to look in the guidelines for the answers. So it's not a bad idea to get used to, when you're coding, flipping back to the beginning of the section, and you can just skim it and see if the code you're working on has anything in it. Okay. So that's why you always have to verify. You have to read what's around the code, and you have to check out your guidelines to see if there's any additional rules you need to follow. All right, so let's talk a little bit about first listed diagnosis and just some few things to keep in mind. It is generally the chief complaint, the entire reason why the patient is there to begin with, okay? It could be a symptom of an identified illness. It may be, you know, if fever or chills if we haven't tested and diagnosed the flu yet, or something to that effect. The patient may be there without a chief complaint. Examples, physicals or counseling, okay? We don't always see the doctor when there's necessarily something wrong with us. Sometimes we have to take a physical for work, sports, or whatever it may be, okay? And sometimes it's counseling, and there's different types of counseling. I'm not talking about like psychiatric counseling. We're talking about if you're diagnosed with a new disease and your doctor wants to counsel you on the different treatment methods for said disease. That's considered the counseling we're talking about here. All right, your external causes index. And we've talked a little bit about this, but there's some important points that you guys need to remember. The external causes index, a code that you find in there, will never be a first listed diagnosis. Never. It's you do not code them first. Okay. You always have a primary reason, and the external cause is just that. It's an external cause. It just adds additional information to how the person got the injury or illness or whatever. Okay. It will probably consist of circumstances that affect care. Yo, give me just 1 second. I can't catch a break this weekend. I just can't. No, nothing. All right, your external causes are going to be circumstances that affect the care, things they need to know. Like if you look over here, they have assault, okay? And then they have all the different ways a person can be assaulted: arson, bite, bodily force, bomb, and then the different types of bombs, brawl, fist fight. We kind of looked at that a little bit last week. But sometimes those things are really important to know when they're treating them. Like if somebody got a bite, they know they need to disinfect that like crazy, right? Something like that. And also, your external causes index is going to be an encounter, not the injury itself. Okay, it's going to be like a fist fight, or you got hit by a horse-drawn buggy, or you were the passenger of a motor vehicle accident. It's an encounter, not the injury itself. Okay, and that's a lot of the reason why it's not ever the first listed diagnosis, because all it does is add additional information. All right. So let's talk a little bit about Z codes. A lot of y'all had questions about Z codes. So let's look at some important points. All right, Z codes. They may be the first listed or they may not be. Some have to be first listed. Like right off the top of my head, Z00.00. That's always, if you use that code, it's first listed, regardless of what else is coming with it. It's always the first listed code. And there's others that you cannot use as first listed, just like the external causes. And there's some that it depends on the situation. It depends on what's going on with your patient. So just bear that in mind, that it could or could not be your first listed. One things to think about when you're trying to decide whether you need to use a Z code, it isn't pertinent to the care being provided. Like, is this important information the provider needs to know? Is this information that needs to be stated in their medical record? You know, things like that. Is it pertinent to care? Z codes are used in all healthcare settings. Anywhere coding is done, clinics, hospitals, nursing homes, skilled nursing facilities, LTAC facilities, they all use Z codes, because it just helps out. It's all that additional information. And just as, so I've got this little list over here to give y'all examples of what the Z codes can indicate. And sometimes it's really, really important. It can indicate history, like history of cancer. If somebody comes in with a lump on their breast and their mom and grandmother had cancer, well, we definitely want to put that in their record, right? So she gets a proper screening. History of malignant neoplasm of the breast. is the one specifically. But exposure or contact, if they've been exposed to tuberculosis or pneumonia, or had contact with an infectious disease, contact with somebody with COVID, something like that, that is pertinent to the care. We need to know those things, so we can rule that out. Circumstances that affect care. And I'm having trouble coming up with an example for that one right off the top of my head. An encounter, not a disease or injury. Also, example off the top of my head is not coming forth. But exposure or contact would be one of those. It's an encounter, but it's not necessarily a disease. They just were exposed, right? And then it can also let you know the status. And what we mean by status is, like, say a pregnant woman. There are Z codes for births. There's a Z code for single birth, vaginal, multiple birth, vaginal, multiple birth, cesarean, etc. Okay, and that lets you know the status of your patient, what happened with that. And there's different ones in other categories, guys. I'm kind of hurting, so I'm having trouble coming up with stuff right now. Any questions thus far? No? Okay.
Find it, which is, I'm just confused on it, how to find all the codes. So maybe I need to go back and just read chapters 1 and 2 over again, because I'm just having trouble, like, finding out how to find the code, which one goes first, which one, like, when do you have to put the A or anything after it? I'm just confused in general. So, what do you suggest that I do?
You might not necessarily need to go back and read all that. Like I said, we're going to work through a lot of stuff, and it's going to be confusing until one day, after you've done it enough and looked at enough, it's going to click. So the fact that you're confused don't let that get you down. Don't let that deter you or overwhelm you. Because this, like I told y'all last week, this is just the beginning. Okay? This is just the basis of it. And that's what I kind of wanted to show y'all this example. This is a good question because it actually lines up with this. I cannot talk enough about how excellent the examples they give in the textbook are, y'all, to help y'all figure out how they came up with the codes that they came up with. Okay, like this came from page, I think it's like, it was figure 3.1, I think, or something like that in chapter 3. If I remember correctly. Yeah, page 51 in your textbook is where I got this from. All right, and I want to go through it with y'all just to show y'all how these examples help you break down the codes and figure out which ones you need to use. All right, so number 1, the first one they have here. The patient complains to her family practitioner of blood in her sputum, which is her phlegm, her spit, things like that. An x-ray shows a coin lesion in the right lung. The patient is 7 years post-mastectomy for breast cancer. The history of breast cancer is pertinent to the patient's chief complaint, right? Just like the example I had kind of just given. Although the patient has been symptom-free for 7 years, her history of breast cancer will contribute to the diagnostic path the physician chooses. So what you would report for this? Okay, so blood in the sputum is called hemoptysis, and none of us are going to know that off the top of my head. I wouldn't have been able to figure that out by myself, but that is the name for that condition. And now here's the other thing. If you're in a doctor's office or in your work environment, they're not gonna give you this patient complains of this. They're gonna give you the what it is. Okay, you're not gonna have to decode or decipher some big scenario. Okay, so just bear that in mind too. But hemoptysis is code R04.2. So you would report that because that's her chief complaint, and that would be reported first, right? That's the whole reason she was in there. Blood in her phlegm. Okay. So they did an x-ray and it showed a coin lesion in her right lung. So coin lesion lung. You would start with lesion and go from there. Okay, get more specific. You would eventually get to code R91.1. And those would be the only two diagnosis codes you would need, except for the history, right? You got a Z code in there because she had a history of cancer. So your personal history of malignant neoplasm of the breast is going to be a Z85.3. Now, this is just to show you how the Z codes relate to the rest of the diagnosis, okay? How that relates to the rest of the code. It's not the first listed, but it is very, very important because that's the first thing they're probably gonna check for this poor woman is if the breast cancer has come back and metastasized to her lungs, right? So it's gonna have a huge impact on the care that she receives and the testing that they do, okay? Right, so in the second example.
Miss Brady, I can't hear. I hear a lot of static from somebody. I can't hear.
There you go. Okay, so the second one. John went camping last month in the Rockies with several friends who now have been diagnosed with Giardia from drinking from the mountain stream. John also drank from the stream but has no symptoms. He presents to the office today to be tested for Giardia. The laboratory results indicate that he has been infected with Giardia whatever, and is prescribed a 10-day course of an antibiotic of some sort. John did not have a chief complaint and had no symptoms. He presented for a screening test and laboratory results indicated an infection. So, since he didn't have any symptoms, that screening is the primary, right? So you're going to code the screening first because that's the only reason he went in there was for that screening. And you remember we read in the guidelines, the screening can be used as primary if that's the only reason he was there. So you're going to use a Z11.0 as your primary. Your Z code is going to be your primary. And then the A07.1 for what he was actually diagnosed with. Okay. His screening came out positive. Okay. So does that kind of help y'all with the Z codes a little bit? I know I had a lot of questions about Z codes. So does that clarify things a little bit more? Yes, no, maybe so.
Helps.
Miss Brandy, like on the personal history of malignant neoplasm of breast, what will we go to first to find that Z85.3?
Well, since it's a neoplasm, you're going to go to the table of neoplasms. Anytime you see the word neoplasm, you go to the table of neoplasms. It's cancer. Well, no, not the personal history. That's going to be. Excuse me, y'all. Personal history. I can't even think straight, y'all. Okay. Whenever you see the word neoplasm, you go to your table of neoplasms. And then it breaks down from there. And we will get more in-depth on that actually this coming week. We're going to break down the table of neoplasms in detail. talk about each column, because I don't know if y'all have looked at it yet, but you look at it and it's like, oh, what is this? But it's really not that hard to understand. It's really not.
Yeah, because I don't see anything that has, well, I guess the more if I look through it, but the table of neoplasm, nothing has these in it. I mean, I feel like
Right. And that's
okay.
because it's personal history. It's not gonna be in the table of neoplasms. It's gonna be
Okay.
in the I think it's gonna be in the Z codes in the back of the manual, actually. Um,
Okay. Well, I'll just pay closer attention next week when we start that.
yeah, the table of neoplasms are a whole thing. That's a whole lesson in itself, which we will get there.
I have a question.
Sure.
Okay, so for the ICD-10 codes, is there always going to be a Z code to go with it?
Tia, you're kind of muffled. I can barely understand you, love.
Hold on. Yeah.
I can't hear you at all. Type it in the chat.
So I had a quick question. It was about the Z codes. When it says exclude unacceptable principal diagnosis, so then where would we, if we can't use that code, but that's what like explains it, where would we go next?
You gotta have something else. There's
'Cause
gotta
I have,
be.
I'm sorry.
That's all right. That's all right. There's got to be something else to go along with it. If you don't
Yeah,
have
because it
something
was for
to go along,
immunization or prophylactic for something. One of the questions in the
immunization is its own code that can be used by itself.
okay.
In fact, we're gonna like number 4 right here, prophylactic vaccination
Yeah.
against smallpox. That's why I picked this one, because these were the ones that y'all had the most questions about. So I wanted to walk through them with y'all. Okay.
Okay, so we'll get there. Never mind, I'm just ahead of you.
Yeah, it's okay. And vaccination is one of those things. It's one of the Z codes that must be listed first, if I remember correctly. Like I said, y'all, I'm in a fair amount of pain today, so I'm a little bit out of it. But all right, so T, are you gonna type your question in?
Can you hear me now?
Yes, I can. Yeah.
Okay, I was just wondering, for the ICD-10 codes, is there always going to be a Z code to go with it?
No,
Okay.
no, there won't always be a Z code. In fact, most of the time there won't be. They're situational. It just depends on the scenario, essentially, what happened. If there's something that can add more information or something like that, then you'll generally have one. But no, you will not always have a Z code. No. Good question.
Okay.
Good question. Okay, so let's take a look at these real quick, guys. And the direction said to locate the Z codes in the I-10 manual, in volume 2 alphabetic index, and then in volume 1 tabular list. Code the following: a person who has been in contact with smallpox. What do y'all think we're gonna look up there? What's our keyword that we're gonna start with?
Smallpox.
Contact.
You could go either way. You could start with either one. You can start with contact, you can start with smallpox. I will say this: you will get the quickest result using contact. Okay, but smallpox will get you there. Smallpox will get you there. The way they do it in the book, they go contact, and then once you find contact, it breaks down into, infectious disease, viral disease, different categories of contact that you can make.
I just got that because it said Z codes are for encounters or situational.
That's correct. That's correct. Okay.
So beside the code, for that contact and smallpox, it says laboratory, but the description on this form doesn't say anything about laboratory. Is that where we need to put that code, that Z code?
Mhm.
What code are you coming up with?
It says Z20.89.
Nope.
No,
Nope.
told you I was lost.
Nope. You're gonna have, let me grab my manual real quick and get to that page. Give me just a second. Okay.
No, 20.90. I don't know.
All right. Voice. All right. If you look up contact, all right, it says with, see also exposure to. So it's kind of what and what. And then they go down and they start listing, all the different kinds of contact and exposures that you can have. All right. So the first thing that I would do is I'd look for smallpox, right? Because that's the contact he had. So you follow down that first indentation. Smallpox laboratory Z20.89. That's where you got, right?
Yes.
Okay. All right. So let's take a look at that. Let's go in the tabular and let's start there. Z2089 and see where it could get us to.
It says contact with and suspected exposure to other communicable diseases.
All right. Z20, you said 0.89, right?
Correct.
Contact with and suspected exposure to other communicable diseases. All right. Well, that doesn't really fit because you see the purple highlight that says other? We kind of know that we're dealing with smallpox, right? So what I would do is I would go back to the beginning of that section, Z20, and I'd start reading. And I'd go down and see what fits our scenario here. All right. So persons with potential health hazards related to communicable diseases. Contact with and suspected exposure to communicable diseases. And look, you have two exclusion notes. You do not use these codes if it's a carrier of an infectious disease or there was a personal history of infectious disease. Those are different codes. This is just contact with exposure to. All right. Intestinal infectious diseases, tuberculosis, rabies, rubella, viral hepatitis, human immunodeficiency. All right, so I'm not seeing smallpox listed in that first section. So I'm looking at Z20.8, contact with and suspected exposure to other communicable diseases. Okay, so smallpox is a communicable disease. It fits in that category. All right, so we're looking in Z20.8, and then 0.81, contact with suspected exposure, bacterial. Smallpox is not bacterial, it's viral. All right, so I'm gonna skip down. I'm not even gonna read under that. I'm gonna skip down to Z20.82, contact with and suspected exposure to other viral communicable diseases. All right, Z20820. Let's look under here and see what it says. Varicella. That's not what we're looking for. Zika virus. That's not what we're looking for. Contact with and suspected exposure to COVID-19. Also, not what we're looking for. Okay. And then Z20828 says contact with and suspect exposure to other viral communicable diseases. All right. So that's going to be our one instead. And you see this Z2089 is like the next code in the list, the one you were looking at. But the difference there is the viral. Smallpox is viral. So that has to be specified. And they don't list it specifically.
Okay, I was thinking we couldn't use, it was wrong because it's got the blue dot beside it and it said unacceptable principal diagnosis, so we couldn't have used that by itself anyways, right? Or no?
Right. It wouldn't be your first listed.
Okay,
But see that Z20.828?
yes,
You can use. That one you can use. But the difference in those is viral, making the distinction between what kind of disease it is.
and we're gonna be expected to know whether something is viral or bacterial?
No,
Okay,
no. Like I said, y'all, this is cold coding. This is not what you're going to be doing at work.
okay,
Most of the time, you're going to get what's called a super bill from the nurses that did the deal. And all your codes are going to be checked off on a little checklist. And all you got to do is verify them and type them in. That's it. You are very rarely ever going to have to dig out this manual.
so this book is just scaring us, right?
If you want to look at it that way. If you want to look
I
at
have a
it that
quick
way.
question.
Yeah.
So,
But it's important. Here's the deal though. When you do in the workplace come across something that you got to verify, you got to know how to use this manual to do it.
Okay.
That's the big thing.
And that's why I'm so stuck on the details because I don't want somebody to hire me and then I'm looking like I don't know what I'm doing,
Right.
you know?
I get that. I get that. But like I said, we're at the very beginning of this, and after you do it so much, you're going to start to recognize different things, and I promise you that one day that dang light bulb's going to go off and it's all going to come together. You could ask so many of my past students and the older students if I'm right about that, and they're like, yeah, eventually one day it just, after you do it so much, after like a month of it, it just goes bing. Why was I stressing about this? This is not that hard. So you'll get it. I have no doubt that you'll get it. It takes, like I said, it takes that repetition. It really takes it getting in there. And also on a lot of the exercises and stuff, guys, the answers are in the back of your textbook. So you can, if you guess at it and you don't know if it's right or not, go ahead and check your answer in the back of the book. And if it's not right, trace it back in the manual and see how they got what they got. That'll help you out too. That'll help out a lot. Okay. All right. So let's move on to number 4. Prophylactic vaccination against smallpox. All right. So anytime you guys see the word vaccination, let it be a little bing, bing, ding in your head. Relate that to immunization. Okay. All right, so what are we gonna start with?
Prophylactic.
You start with vaccination. But like I said, related to immunization, and I'm pretty sure if you look up vaccination in the index, the alphabetic index, it'll say C immunization. So that it'll lead you to where you need to be. But it's immunization and then encounter for is what it goes down to. All right, so the code for encounter for an immunization is actually on the same page as the last code we looked at. If you look at Z23, encounter for immunization, and it says there's a lot of under that. There's a lot of stuff under that, okay? Code first in a routine childhood examination. Nothing to do with what we got, okay? And then procedure codes are required to identify the types of immunizations given. I'm sorry, y'all, give me just 1 second. If I could get this thing. Sorry, guys. All right, so Z23 is your encounter for immunization. There's a lot of things that are under that, guys. But generally, the encounter for immunization, and then they're specifically for some type of vaccination or immunization, is just the Z23. You will have CPT codes that go along with that. One for they call it the administration code. It's actually the poke when they stab you with the needle, the administration of the vaccine. But generally, when they're coming in for just any type of vaccination, it's encounter for immunization. All right, personal history of malignant neoplasm of the lip. All right, so this is one of those history ones, right? So that's where we're going to start. History, it's going to indent down. You're going to go personal. You're going to find personal down in there. And then malignant neoplasm. And then it gets kind of hinky because you got to pick a body part. All right. And while our scenario is saying lip, I think our best option in there is oral cavity, your mouth, right? Oral cavity, specified site, not elsewhere classified. Very good. So it's bringing me to like Z85 and some change. All right, and there are a lot of personal history codes. So personal history, malignant neoplasm, let's see, digestive organs, esophagus, stomach, carcinoid tumor, intestine, pancreas, bronchus, trachea. Oh, genital organs. All right, so if you look, Z85.8, if you follow it down and you get there, It says personal history of malignant neoplasms of other organs and systems. They list, all the major stuff, and then they have other organs and systems. And the first one, Z85.81, is personal history of malignant neoplasm of the lip, oral cavity, or pharynx. Okay? But that has that red stop sign, so that means we can't code that, right? We can't stop there. We got to look at our indent down and see how else it needs us to specify it. So 85.810, tongue. 85818, lip, oral cavity, or pharynx. And then 85819, unspecified site of lip. Well, we're not unspecified. We know it was on the lip. So our code is going to be that Z85.818. Okay. Any questions thus far? I know y'all generally do. Anything y'all got for me?
I'm not
I'm just
gonna
gonna
lie.
trust the process. I'm just gonna
Go
trust
ahead.
the process and trust that everything is gonna be better. I just appreciate you still doing the class, not feeling well.
It's okay. I could not, I was about this close to just canceling and going to urgent care, but I was like, I canceled yesterday. Y'all all are having questions and, you're unsure about things right now. So I didn't want to do that. I wanted to come and at least give y'all some insight on the things that y'all are reading right now. And I know didn't do anything to any great detail, but hopefully next week will be a better week. I am putting it in the universe that it's going to be a better week. So we'll have our coding workshop on Wednesday and then our regular on Thursday. And I promise the coding workshops is where things will start clicking for you, because we will start picking stuff apart piece by piece and getting really detailed. And then as we go along, and it kind of seems like when we do coding, each week we're hitting a different chapter in the tabular, a different body system. I forgot where I was going with that. That hurt. Each week. So we'll get real specific on each, because they're unfortunately, y'all, they're all a little different. They're all a little different, depending on what part of the body you're dealing with. But that's why it's really important to read around the codes that the alphabetic index brings you to. You really got to get in that tabular and kind of dig. And like I said, the more you see it, the more you do it, one day you're going to just be able to down the page and find what you need. Promise. Because you're going to be so used to looking at it. Another thing y'all can do too, guys, is kind of to help read through those things faster. Look at what they have highlighted. Really take a look at what the when you're going and indenting down, take a look at what they have highlighted. That'll clue you in to the main point of that code, and sometimes that'll pinpoint it for us. Like for this one, for that Z85.818, lip, oral cavity, or pharynx was highlighted for me, so I knew that was the code I needed to use. So it's all about, honestly, it's all about repetition. It's all about repetition, and you will get used to it, and it will get better. And I appreciate you trusting the process, as I promise we'll get there. Definitely. Do I have anybody in here who's was in coding the last time we went through, who's almost done with the program?
I've done the CPT coding.
You came in at the end. I think you came in at the end during the CPT coding. And just to give the others a quick rundown, Tia. When Tia first started, she dropped in straight into coding.
Yes, so did I.
kind of towards the end of it. But it's still, Tia, weren't you a lot more comfortable with it after a few weeks?
Oh yes, definitely. Like when I first seen it, I had a few meltdowns. So, because I was so confused, like the ICD-10 is like very confusing for me. I don't understand any of it. So if I had to pick between ICD-10 and CBT, I would definitely pick the CBT over ICD-10 in a heartbeat because I understand it better.
You've been through this CPT though. You've done that coding.
Yeah.
This is new for you. But I promise you, it's going to be just like the CPT. In a couple of weeks, 2 to 3 weeks, you're going to be so much more comfortable with it than you are today that you're going to feel a lot better about it. Promise.
Yeah, I
I'm
was the
ready,
same way.
'cause-
When I started, I was in the CPT code, and I was like, "What did I sign up for?"
Yes.
I was like, "Oh my God."
That girl, that's
Yeah.
almost the way everybody feels, especially if you start in coding. It's like, oh crap, you just got dropped into the deep end, from jump. So that's normal. That's perfectly normal. But I promise you, it will get better. And we can always, y'all, if y'all are that uncertain about things, do not be afraid to reach out to me. And if we need to do a one-on-one, like Tia had reached out to me to do a one-on-one on the ICD-10, and I was like, come to this week's Zoom, and if you still have, some questions and stuff, then we can do a one-on-one on Friday. You want to do that, Tia?
Yes, ma'am, I do.
Okay, we can still do that. That's no problem. Text me with what's a good time for you. Okay, tomorrow.
Okay.
Okay, that sounds good. I'm always willing to do one-on-ones if y'all would prefer that. I just ask that we let us get there in the curriculum before we jump ahead. That's all I ask. Okay, y'all have any other questions or concerns or anything for me at this time?
No, ma'am.
No? Okay. All right, guys. Well, y'all have a good weekend. Stay safe and healthy out there. If you drive a Kia, watch your stuff. That's all you say. Watch your stuff. But y'all have an awesome weekend. And again, thank y'all so much for your time. I sure appreciate y'all.
Thank you, ma'am. Hope everything gets better for you.
Thank you. Like I said, I put it in the universe. It's gonna be better.
That's it. Manifestation.
He doesn't
Y'all
get
have a good
more
one.
than we can handle, right?
That's it.
He must think I'm a tough cookie.
Oh, I know you are. All right, man.
He must think I'm a tough cookie because sometimes I feel like it piles on.
So my grandma used to love to tell me, God ain't gonna give you nothing you can't handle.
My grandma used to say the same thing. Same thing.
Y'all have a good one. Hope you feel better, Miss B.
Thank you guys. Y'all have a nice weekend.
All right, you too.
Bye-bye.